So then, speaking of amazing, did anybody take the time to look at Amy Miller's website?
Yes.
Because it is amazing. So with that, we're just going to turn it over to the amazing Amy. I did like on your website, you said art speaks to places within me that I never knew existed and allows me to explore and experience more than I could ever have imagined at home and in St. Louis and through our travels. But I love that. And so with that, it's yours.
Okay.
So there will be a couple of, little things going on, but
That's fine. That's fine. And is this working? Doesn't seem like it is. I don't think so. No.
Should be. Might need to stare.
I didn't switch it far enough. Oh, there we go. That's learn how to operate microphone. All right. Well, my name's Amy Miller. And I a lot of times put the S in there because there's a lot of Amy Millers. Yeah, there is. And there's still a lot of Amy S. Millers, but if you're curious, it stands for Suzanne. The only original part of my name. As you can see, I do a lot of different things. Focus is not my strong suit. I think it's also part of being a working artist who's trying to make a living from their artwork. You kind of do what comes your way to a certain extent, and things tend to grow off of that, and you never know where the next opportunity is going to come from. My background, I grew up in the St. Louis area. Y'all are familiar with Arnold. I was a Fox High School graduate. Went to Fox all through school. And then I went to William Woods University in Fulton, Missouri, and got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in interior design. And then I was an interior designer for corporate and healthcare environments for a little over 6 years. I got tired of being laid off, and because that's how my exit from my first 2 jobs. Every 3 years I got laid off. So I went to work for a company that did framing and artwork consultation for interior designers and their clients. And that sort of began my art consulting career. And I worked with a lot of different healthcare facilities here in St. Louis. I've done a lot of stuff at like St. Luke's, back when it was still St. Anthony's. I did some things down there. A lot of senior living facilities in and out of St. Louis. And then towards the middle of that part of my career, I purchased part of the company that I was working for, which was the retail frame shop. If any of you are familiar with Prince Charming Gallery, they used to be over in Ladue. I own that for, well, technically I still own it, but I just do framing and stuff in my home now. And making room for all the other creative things that I want to do. We can go to, perfect. How did you know? You saw me. I have a lot of influences, and I'll say kind of all of my past career things have also influenced. I would say at the center of it is memories, not just personal memories, but collective memories, and even unintentional memories, things that we remember or ingrain in ourselves, not even realizing that we're doing it because it's what we're fed by the media or by family or friends or just the world in general, that kind of shape how we think and how we view things. I do a lot of just sitting and watching people. It's my favorite thing to do, is people watch. I love going to the airport. It's a great place to do that, because you see people from all over. And you can imagine, where did they come from? Where are they going? What are they doing? Why are they in a hurry? Are they going to miss their plane? I can sit there and make up stories about everybody, and probably all of them be wrong, but still it's fun. I love to travel, obviously, airport. I've not gotten to do a lot of that since COVID, just more difficult, and financially it's expensive to travel. but I try and travel. It's forced me to explore more things locally, which has been a lot of fun. I'm kind of museum buff, so finding random museums, tiny places. Like I live in the Beagle Mill neighborhood, and there's a miniatures museum there. I'd lived there for 15 years and didn't know it was there. And so just seeking out new things in that way and new adventures where I'm at. I love color. I think that's what drew me into interior design, was playing with color and how color influences us. And as far as other things influencing us, from working in architecture and interiors and the art consulting, I got an interest in evidence-based design. And have any of you ever heard of that before?
No.
Okay.
Tell me about it.
Me too. Basically what it is interiors and architecture. It's basically the study of and implementation of research based on the built environment affecting our health and welfare. That every environment you're in, it plays some role in how you are in that space and even outside of that space. There's lots and lots of growing research being done in that field since, I guess, the Center for Health Design started in '93, and so since then there's been more and more studies. So a lot of your newer healthcare facilities, especially hospitals and senior living, are really doing a lot to implement things that they're learning through basically scientific study of environments and how different things affect it. Things such as having daylighting in hospital corridors and in rooms versus fluorescent lighting. People in, like a lot of new hospitals now, it's one person to a room. Used to is you tried to get 2, maybe even 3 in there, and they have found that the length of stay is markedly shorter when people have their own room, which made it basically financially feasible to, take it to corporate and be like, hey, it's going to save us money in the long run if we have individual rooms because people will be in and out faster. As far as art goes, it plays a role in that too. There's been studies that in like surgical recovery suites, patient rooms that have landscape imagery, that have an area of respite, which is like there's a tree somebody could sit under, or there's the other side of the lake that they could go to, or somewhere that people could kind of escape into the picture. The reported levels of perceived pain are much lower, which means less pain medicine, which means people are recovering faster and leaving the hospital faster. Of course, there are other things that add to that that are being implemented, but there's been studies that show that really does. Having something to focus on rather than all the tubes and signage and all this stuff makes a difference. It also makes a difference in waiting areas where loved ones are. Lower blood pressure, lower anxiety, and basically the kind of commonality between it is nature art, whether it's, even if it's like an abstract of leaves and flowers or something, is better than like a hard abstract with, dots and lines and that are really succinct. Unless you want to use it as a wayfinding method where you want to be able to say, okay, you go down to where the red painting is and then turn left. Because honestly, that helps lower blood pressure if people know where to go to and where to turn. So it's really interesting to read the studies on these different things. I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I also consider those things whenever I'm choosing colors or it made me start incorporating more landscape things into my paintings. I don't know whether they would necessarily be ideal things to put into hospital rooms, but I think they could have a place in a hospital somewhere, kind of thing. Let's see, other influences, other artists. I love to go to the art museum. My favorite place is in front of the Mark Rothko painting in the newer wing. I'm a big fan of his because he taught me that color moves. Very simple fields of colors, and if you sit there and you look at it long enough, it vibrates. And so I try and keep that in mind whenever I'm choosing colors, what colors are going to move against each other or work together. I also like a lot of illustrators slash painters because that's kind of what I do. I do a little bit of both, and so I enjoy like Norman Rockwell, who does a lot of very narrative pieces, obviously. And Maxfield Parrish, he does sort of these transcendent, ethereal sort of skies and things like that. And so I've just always enjoyed looking at his pieces. And I don't necessarily try and emulate him, but I feel like my style is similar in that. I'm also a huge Peanuts Charles Schulz fan. My birthday is the same day as Charles Schulz. And my big, hairy, audacious dream, I'll share this with you because it's funny, but is to, on my 50th birthday, it will be on Thanksgiving Day, and I want to walk in the Thanksgiving Day parade carrying the Snoopy balloon. So if anybody knows anybody at Macy's, let me know. Then let's see, I like vintage stuff. Like if you walked into my house, you'd be like, oh, she likes Art Deco over here. But wait a second, her kitchen is very 50s retro. And because I still have my metal cabinets and linoleum floor, things like that. And my family is a huge influence on me. I'm very blessed that I have a very small family, but we're pretty tight knit. And as someone once said, we're very high functioning emotionally. In that we all get along, and it's a little scary sometimes. Everybody tells their stories about, oh, they don't get along with this person or that person in their family. It's like we all get along. It's kind of weird. Wasn't always that way. Then I already talked a little bit about my picture framing and art consulting. I am a internationally certified professional picture framer from the Professional Picture Framers Association, which means I studied and went and took 3 tests and passed all these tests so that I know how to archivally frame things and how to lace the back of needlework and block it beforehand, and all the techniques to do framing that doesn't harm or damage what's being framed. Then some examples of things I framed. I like feats of engineering, such as framing a wedding dress in an archival way where there's actually no fasteners that actually touch the dress. That was a challenge. There's literally nuts and bolts in there. And like the little dress, each one of the bottom side of each one of those folds in the dress had to be fastened down. So it's a lot of sewing, getting things to lay the way you want them to and stay that way when people take them and do crazy things with them. Let's see. What else? The next one. Getting golf balls to stay on the side of the hole instead of smack in the middle. I framed more hole-in-one golf ball things than I can count. I did the Peanuts things, those are for myself, but I did some freehand mat cutting on those, and that was the first and last time I did that. They have computers for it now. Then the next page are some things that I did for the top, and the two left bottom are shadow boxes, collages that I did for a senior living facility over here in Illinois. I want to say it's St. Joseph's. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. But
St. Paul's?
maybe it was St. Paul's. And the game board ones, of course, were in their game room. And then each of the suites, they wanted one that was some sort of a nostalgia type thing that the residents enjoyed. And they were by far the hit of all the artwork that was selected. And the one on the bottom right is, I put that in there because it's a fabric wrapped mat. The article was a friend had gone to the Lily Pulitzer estate auction. And it was a huge Lily Pulitzer fan. And she had worn that dress to the auction and wanted to use a piece of the fabric to wrap the mat. So it turned out cool. Then the next page is some artwork design that I did for a company in Raleigh, North Carolina, where they wanted to feature the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that one on the left, and they had this weird corner space that they wanted to do. So I basically made a collage of different pieces on different materials, and then sometimes it's just as simple as a series of poster prints that I like to bring some color into rooms. And then that's enough about framing. Illustration. I never really thought of myself as an illustrator. I did take illustration in college, and my professor there was like, "You really should be an illustrator." And I'm like, "I don't even know what an illustrator does. I don't get it." And here I am doing illustrations all the time. I would say probably my first foray into illustration was this book that I did for a charity, and it's the first and last time I've done watercolor illustrations. I learned a lot doing this book. Publishing a book is hard, especially whenever you're picking out color. But I think it turned out well, and I've always been proud of that.
Amy, you have about 30 minutes
Okay.
altogether.
Okay. I'll speed up a little bit. I'm gonna take your book that I'm just now finishing up the illustrations for. It's kind of different. This is all done digitally. I use my iPad a lot, and I use Adobe Fresco to draw in. And then also with illustrations, I've started to think in collections of things. These are my, oh, one of my pictures disappeared off there. That's okay. I think I actually have it here. It's my St. Fanny Lewis sticker. I do a lot of sticker designs. The other designs I use on prints, note cards, really, once you do a design and you have it digitally, or you even have a photograph of your painting, you can put it on anything. And again, those are all done in fresco. And then the plants and pollinators collection, I actually used photographs that I took of a butterfly garden I have in my yard, and basically traced over those to create the drawings, and then colored them in and added cool backgrounds. And so I have stickers and note cards and prints, and they're a lot of fun. And then I have bunny collection, which this is kind of that opportunity coming out of nowhere. I think I had a framing client that found out that I was also an artist, and she wanted me to do a painting with that was black and white with a bunch of bunnies in it. And so I did basically like the all white one that has a gold bunny in it. It didn't have the gold bunny, it was all black and white. I showed that to her and she's like, oh, I've totally changed my mind about the project. I don't want to do that anymore. And I was like, I just made this just for you. And so it kind of sat for a while and I'm like, well, it's still cute. I'm like, I need to have a gold bunny in there, you know, it's like this special one. And it just kind of grew. That one was super popular at shows and stuff, so I just started adding to the other ones. And now I've got like a whole group and I have a plan for other bunnies. And I have those in prints and note cards and stickers as well. And then the next one is a bunch of my pun stickers. I just like a good pun. I think at Halloween, the favorite one is I've got Spirit, and then Christmas, it's kind of a dead heat between Slaying It and Gingerbread Man. Then we go to murals.
Sorry.
I'm getting ahead of you. It's okay. This is one that I did in a residence in the Cherokee Street area. And she basically came to me and had the blue and the gold that she wanted to use, and she wanted something botanical. And so I did a few different sketch ideas for her, and this is kind of where we wound up. And it was a lot of line work. It was very different for me. I'd never done anything like this before, but I was really happy with how it turned out in the end. Then the next one is the mural that I just finished last week, and it's at the Manchester Aquatic Center in Manchester, Missouri. And they wanted something that it's going into the ladies' room, dressing room area, and they wanted something that was bright colors and had to do with water, parks, that kind of thing. So on the right is my actual design that I submitted, and then the other one, I can't talk. The other one is actual photograph of it completed. And that I used spray paint and just regular acrylic paint.
Do you seal that when you're done?
Yes, I used the Montana spray paint. They have a matte varnish spray, and it works really nice. And once it's on there, it's just like you can tell that it's sealed, because I figured a spray would be easier with all the nooks and crannies of a cement block wall. This is a piano I did. Was it last summer? I think so. With Webster Arts. And that was kind of a play off of the illustration that I had done with the plants and pollinators. I just kind of turned that into a design on the piano, because it was supposed to be about community. And so my spiel was about the community between plants and pollinators and how it's a cooperative community and they each need the other. Okay. All right, mixed media artwork. Now we get into the really good stuff. This is my favorite part. This is a self-portrait. Doesn't it look just like me? I was in art course at the time, and that was the assignment anyway, was to do ourselves as an animal. And
Who?
exactly. The next one is one of the few abstracts that I've done that is mixed media. And it's interesting because you can't really see it in the picture, but it has a lot of shimmer in it, because I used a lot of this Pearlex stuff, and sometimes it was a matter of while the paint was wet, taking it, just kind of blowing it off my hand onto it and letting it fall, so it's very subtle in some places. And and I also started experimenting with a lot of line work, fine line work in it. And this one also has a lot of the fine line work as well with that. And I think I used some of the Pearl X in that as well as some cold wax medium in there. This one I think Michael used in some of his promotion stuff. This is kind of an example of, I'm a planner, and so I use my iPad and Fresco, and I will take source images and I cut out the parts that I want. And like the little girl on this, she's from one, her body's from one, and then I took the skirt from another picture and the puffy sleeves from another, so she's like 4 different pictures all put together and wanted to get the look that I wanted. There's 3 or 4 different abstract poster prints that I pulled colors from and things like that. And then you can kind of see that some of that stuff translates into the final piece and some of it doesn't. Things kind of take on a life of their own. Like I didn't do the orange swirls, I just decided it didn't need it. Because I wanted the focus to stay on the father and daughter. Next one is my raccoon and my trash panda, as my nephew would say. I asked him what I should draw, and he said trash panda, which he had to explain to me what that was, because I didn't know. And I asked him, what's the trash panda doing? He's like, well, he's in a boat. I'm like, what was he doing in a boat? Well, he's in a storm. And so I keep asking him questions, he keeps collaborating on the story, and this is basically an illustration of the story he told me was going on. So I give him credit. Aiden Miller helped with this one. He's very proud of that. He reminds me all the time, I helped you with that. This one, the constellations and stuff, I like to use these little squeeze bottle things to paint lines with. And I did that with acrylic paint in my underpainting whenever I was doing that. And then did washes over it with oils. And then I did the white lines that are swooping, again, was with one of these bottles, but it was, I had thinned down some oil paint to do that.
I got a different name for you.
Mm-hmm.
Frogmageddon.
You know, it was funny. Somebody asked me if this was sort of an apocalyptic thing, and I'm like, no. Yes, ma'am.
I don't want to interrupt, but I see a lot of them you're using, which you've got on there is spray paint. What are you using to spray paint?
That's part of my demonstration.
Okay, good.
Then that'll make more sense.
You got 20 minutes.
Okay. I'll cruise through these. Then this one, if you see sort of the pink spots that are up in the sky, that was spray paint. It's all the way underneath. But go to the next slide. This slide kind of shows the evolution of that painting, where it started with that little sketch of the little girl up at the top, but it was going to be in a totally different painting that I had already done the sky and stuff for, and I was just working on how she was going to fit into it, and then I decided I wasn't going to use it for that, and came into doing, I did the sketch on the top left on the iPad, and you can see the picture that I used, a castle, and some of the other images that I used for the burning ships. And originally I was going to do a pirate ship whenever I first thought of burning ships, and then while I was looking for that, I found pictures of paper boats. I'm like, that's even better, and used that in that one. Summertime is that's also got the planning that I did. So you can see some things are still kind of the same and some are. That's a picture of my brother. We had a contentious relationship as children. things concerning my personal memories, a lot of times it's working out at my grandparents' farm every summer. And there was good things that happened and bad things that happened, like him shoving me in cow patties and things like that were bad things. The good things were sitting on the picnic table under the stars, eating watermelon fresh from the garden, and watching the stars come out at night, and us just both being in awe of it. And so whenever I do things that are memory centric, I'm trying to work out sort of for myself, sometimes focusing on the beautiful parts and the positive parts of people, places, and things, rather than focusing on negative aspects of it, and kind of combating that dichotomy, trying to weigh more to the positive side than to the negative. He didn't think it was him when he first saw it. So my typical. This one is little girl spinning like the carnival swings. That was my favorite ride at the school carnival as a kid. I was a very anxious child, and I felt a lot of freedom because I didn't have to have somebody to ride with. I could ride it as many times as I wanted all by myself. I was also very small. It was one of the big kid rides that I was big enough for. And so that's kind of where that all stemmed from. I have another raccoon, and he's very hungry, so all he thinks about is food. And that one I actually have some collage in it. A lot of it got covered up, but whenever I stayed with my parents during COVID, because my mom was recovering from surgery, my dad would read the paper in the morning, and I would try to do the New York Times crossword, emphasis on try. And so I saved some of those, and I used that underneath as part of my collage. The next one is a painting that I was kind of inspired by my neighbor and his little boy when they'd be outside mowing the grass. I was kind of like, well, this is kind of one of those quintessential moments of parenthood kind of thing. The next one is Seeker, which that's what my house looks like, sort of. It's an abridged version of it, minus the lavender fields and the woman on top, but but there's chimney in it. It's a little bungalow like that, and I do have a row of lavender beside my yard. And then the next one is Creating Her World. My parents live close to the Sandy Creek covered bridge down in Hillsboro, Missouri, and that's kind of where that idea came from. And I painted this whenever I was kind of trying to be like, okay, I want to do this art career thing, and I don't really know how to do that, so I'm just going to figure it out as I go and kind of create my own world and do it how I want to do it. This group also kind of shows how the top left is the initial idea I had, which came from a friend of mine that lives near Arnold Park, is an avid photographer, and took that picture of the albino deer that lives there. And so I'm like, oh, that would be great in the painting. And originally it was going to be Titus deer, hence the pocket watch there and everything. And as I got the background and the water painted, I decided I didn't want to do that. I'm like, it needs to be different. And so I changed to having 2 deer in it, and I like it a lot better that way. The messenger, that's from, that promenade is from the Biltmore Mansion in Asheville, North Carolina. And it is not a reference to Harry Potter, which I get a lot, or Game of Thrones, or Taylor Swift in the Romeo and Juliet. It was just a place that I was very awestruck by how beautiful the landscape was there, and the beautiful architecture with beautiful landscape. And ever since, from the day I was there, I'm like, I'm gonna paint that someday. So there. This is one of my most recent ones, which is very landscape heavy. There is a little tiny figure up there next to the castle, and she is shooting for the stars. You can see those stars have formed a target up there. And the other picture kind of shows I had a lot of it done, but then I decided as I was getting to that bottom corner, I'm like, something else needs to happen here, and that's where the little waterfall came in. So I like to change midstream sometimes. Then pet portraits is another thing that I do because they pay bills. But I also really enjoy doing them. And I realized all I put up here were dogs. I've done cats, I've done lizards, I've done birds, fish. But obviously I have a soft spot for dogs. The one at the top center, that was my dog. And then the last art one is just some other animal pieces that I've done that are, those were all 6 by 6 except for the hummingbird was 12 by 12. But those are kind of studies or practice type things that I tend to do pretty well with selling at art fairs and things like that because they're a lot more affordable than a large painting. And that's it for my slides. How am I doing on time?
We got about 12 minutes.
Okay.
Maybe push a little longer because our peak is a little on the lighter side.
Okay.
Just go and keep going.
Okay. And I was gonna say, whenever I'm doing this stuff, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions.
Have you ever looked at Michael Park's work?
No.
His stuff kind of has that vibe.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. Yeah. I have a hard time finding contemporary artists that I think are doing things like I'm doing. Not that I think I'm that original or anything, but I get a lot of, oh, are you really into anime? And fantasy art, I'm like, no, not really. I've never even seen any anime cartoons or anything. Just because that whole sort of whimsical, ethereal, starry skies and that kind of thing is in there a lot. What I'm going to show you is kind of how I start my backgrounds of paintings, and it's sometimes a little messy. I'm going to start with this blank one, just to confuse everyone. Okay. So, what I tend to do, I like to use acrylic inks, because a lot of these have metallic pigments in them. I like metallics. I like shiny things. And then I've got the Pearlex powder, and then I'm gonna see. I don't want that spray paint. I want too. And I use these little plastic templates a lot. You can take tape and tape off certain areas if you don't want certain things to show and you just want a specific part of a pattern. It looks kind of nice. So what I'm going to do first, this is just water, is when I get this to, this is the weirdest little spray bottle. It just wants to come out in little bitty bits. But basically just going to kind of saturate the panel, because whenever I put the color on it, I want it to just kind of flow, sort of like watercolor would.
What's the substrate?
This is just a canvas panel. I've done it on canvas. Down there, for the first time I used a birch panel that had gesso on it. I've done it on works on paper before. If you're going to do paper, I would get a heavy paper and tape it down well, so it doesn't get super buckly on you. But I'll just put some drops on there. And then
What kind of ink is that?
it's acrylic ink. And then I'll sometimes take things like a fork or whatever, and you can kind of drag it around, or put some more water on it and kind of tilt it different ways. Let it run off.
On your finger?
Yes, I'm very messy. I have a table that's just like covered with cardboard in my studio in my house where I do this. And then one of the fun things to do is take alcohol, it's just rubbing alcohol, and you can kind of spray it on there, and it will make little shapes and stuff. And sometimes, depending upon how wet it is, they'll start coming back together, and then you just wait till it's a little drier and do it again. Put some over this way. Then, oh, I have this one. Usually would let it dry a little bit more before I do this part, but we're not going to this time. We're gonna do Don't fail me now. Just want to do that. All right. I'll just go through the guy here. Okay, did it not just spray 2 seconds ago?
Where do you get your small little spray paint?
I order these online through Dick Blick. It's MTN, not to be confused with Montana Paints, which is another kind of spray paint that I use for murals. These are MTN, and they are water-based, acrylic, and made for indoor use. So they have very low, I mean, they still have a little odor, but it's very low odor. But I'll use outdoor ones too, sometimes. What did I do? I got it, thank you. Now maybe it works, since it fell on the floor. Alcohol is also great for cleaning things up. It's a great solvent. Let's see. Oh, reference. Okay, well, my spray demonstration is not going to work. Anyway, what I do is I then spray different parts of the thing with this, and it just builds texture. I'm trying to think of something. Is that on one of these paints that's up here? It's kind of obvious. A lot lot of the light spots on here are where alcohol pushed it out, and then I just use that to kind of determine where I was going to put stars. Kind of let it drive that part of the piece. I'm going to grab this one real quick, and we'll go on to, this one is still in progress. I did something new on this. On it, I used I'll use this one to demonstrate it. And this was a canvas that I did. It was red and white, just these kind of weird shapes a long time ago, and never sold it. So I'm like, I'm gonna do something else with it. So it's gonna be, and it was a vertical then, but now it's gonna go horizontal and have this little clownfish in it, and this is gonna be like coral. And so I'm gonna take this, and I use heavy gel medium. And I have this little squeegee thing, which they're super handy for lots of things, but I want to get some of this different texture on here in places. And so you just lay it down and kind of spread that over the areas that you want to show up. See where it brought up there, like I don't want that little line there that was at the edge, so I will just use my fingers a lot. Maybe do some over here.
Do you ever get overwhelmed by the number of possibilities or tools that you can use on something?
Yes. And it's like every time something new comes out, it's like this mix of excitement because, ooh, I want to try that.
And terror.
And terror of, I don't need more supplies. I don't need more stuff. But it's so fun. Some other fun things I like to use are these Daler Rowney mixed media pens, because you can put basically thin down paint, and I would thin it with like a high flow medium or a airbrush medium if you want it really thin, because if you just use water it can start breaking the binding in the paint, and then it'll start failing on you and split and do all kinds of crazy things. But they have all different sizes and tips and things with those, and then when you're done with it you just clean it out. You can use it for a different one.
What did you call it?
It's by a company called Daler Rowney, R-O-W-N-E-Y. And it's a mixed media pen is what they call it.
So you put the media in that and
Yeah.
and use it.
So it comes pattern, like this is a sort of a
nib.
Yeah, nib. And you can take it apart, put your media in there, and they take a little playing around with to find the consistency that works for what you want to do. But if you've got a little patience, you can figure it out. I haven't found where they work very well with oil stuff. I kind of stick to the squeeze bottles and thinning it down with. I tried using just Galkid, and because that's what I usually do when I'm doing washes and things like that, and that dried too quickly in the thing, so I just use maybe a little bit of solvent and then some mineral oil. What else? I like to use a glass palette, whether I'm doing acrylics or oils. Yes, sir. 5 minutes. Okay. Whether I'm using acrylics or oils, because if it dries on here, if it's oil, you just spray it with rubbing alcohol, when you get your handy dandy big scraper out. This is so much easier to use than the little tiny ones. Get them in the paint section at the hardware store. And if it's acrylic, you just spray water on it and it'll scrape right up. I'm trying to think, do I have anything else specific? Oh, sometimes I use things like this, and you can kind of lay it on there and it'll add hair to it, which is always great. That's right. Which, you know.
It's proof it's yours.
Right. My DNA is on it. Yes. And sometimes you have to leave it on for a while till it's a little more dry, and you pull it off, and it'll kind of give you almost a little stained glass sort of effect. Yes. With a very tiny brush and very thin down paint. Especially if I'm doing it in the background of a piece, I'll use one of these little squeeze bottle things, because they have all kinds of different tips that are different gauges that will change how fat or thin your line is. But like the big lines on the summertime piece, that was all done with a brush, very carefully. Sometimes I'll even take like a fine line brush and I will cut off some of the bristles to make it even smaller, get an even thinner line.
You use like a brace or something, like to rest your arm on?
Yeah, although I'm notorious for forgetting to do that and setting my hand on something to do it and then having paint on it. I do that a lot. But yeah, when I remember to, I do something, because my hand's pretty steady, but it's not that steady. Does anybody else have any questions about anything?
I see a little box there, looks like beads in it.
Oh, this is the different gauge tips
Oh, okay.
for the little bottles. I got that off of Amazon, good old Amazon. And that was kind of I was looking for a solution to a problem.
And told your card.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh, well, this might work, this might work, this might work.
Oh, this might do something else.
Right, exactly. I'm like, oh, well, this looks interesting. And yeah, I have.
Do you always paint with a purpose, or sometimes do you paint for the sake of experimenting?
That's a good question. Lately it's been more purpose, I think, but I think sometimes I start things with a purpose and they become an experiment. Like I started painting this one with the purpose of, this was the digital drawing that I did, and then the experiment was doing the texture of the clock faces on here. It was
And how
not
did you do the
perfect.
texture on the clock?
The way that I did the texture that was on here with putting the stencil down and the gel medium and putting it over and then just lifting it up.
Since Sharpies are alcohol inks, and you can make alcohol inks out of Sharpies, have you just used like a white Sharpie for any of your lines, or?
I've not had a lot of luck with keeping Sharpie from bleeding on me. And so I tend to try and go towards the acrylic paint side of things, or the acrylic ink. The thing with acrylic inks is they're pretty stable once they're completely dry, but if you come back in with water on top of them again, they kind of want to start dissolving again. So usually, once I've done acrylic inks, I can always add more acrylic inks to them, but only with keeping in mind that I may lose some of what is already there. I've even gotten into a practice of, if there's something in a piece that, like, I'll start out, oh, I like this little trail of dots here. I will immediately cover that up whenever I go to do my first oil glaze on it, because I'm holding it too precious. Just get rid of it. And sometimes I do that, sometimes I'm still too attached to it. But it is something that I do, especially if I find that it's getting in the way of me proceeding on things. And just kind of reminding myself that nothing's that precious. It can always be painted over. I've been doing a lot of painting over old paintings lately. I think most of those little animals that I did were done over some abstract pieces that I'd done. And so it's kind of like, just make the old new.
I think we would love to listen to you all night, but unfortunately, I think we can't.
I understand.
So,
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
yeah, we're gonna have to have you back, and
Absolutely.
part 2.
Sounds good.
All right, so we're going to have the 50-50. What? Oh, okay.
It's just field business, okay?
I'm gonna give this to you before I forget it because
thank
you
you.
probably want that.
Thank you.
And then.